We're human, don't you know, just like you. Welcome to season 2 of We're Human, and this may be the difficult second book, or possibly the triumphant sequel. In these coming episodes, we're talking leadership and all its complicated glory. So, leadership and dot, dot, dot. Room for a variety of topics, perspectives, things to consider for your own experience, and perhaps your ambition. In this episode, we're discussing ethics. Pretty straightforward, right? Or are they? Joining me for this exploration into the moral forest is Kirsty Waite. Kirsty was brought up in a family business, so understanding how businesses work is in her DNA. Followed by nearly 2 decades of experience leading and coaching teams within global organizations, she trains the next generation of coaches through her work as a senior tutor delivering ILM coaching and mentoring qualifications. She is also the founder of the Ethical Coaching Company and truly believes in the power of coaching, knowing firsthand the difference it can make to the success of a business. So welcome, Kirsty.
Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. And I know we've had a bit of a chat ahead of this around, and I think we probably ran a bit over time, didn't we? So we have to watch the timing on this recording, I think. Now, I've got to admit, I was a little bit triggered by not triggered in a bad way, but just something that popped in my head like, oh, it's the mention of ethics and family businesses in the same breath. Now, it's probably a bias I have, which isn't a good bias, based on some fairly dodgy behavior I've witnessed that's been related to organizations either being completely manned by family members, with a few others, kind of outsiders, if you like, coming in, or organizations that have employed family members in kind of hierarchical positions to each other, and the fallout. I think as an HR professional, former HR professional, dealing with that fallout's been quite interesting. But I have to ask myself the question, because obviously this has been triggered in me. Am I being extremely unfair to family businesses?
Really great question. And I get it when you look at it from a HR perspective of your background, it's messy, isn't it? I think when you think about any family business, it is messy. And I think it depends from my point of view. I think it depends on what that structure's come from, because normally with a family business, it has been started around the kitchen table with the people in the family, and it's kind of grown from there, and then it's either stayed at that level or it's grown and scaled. But you are very much the biases within that business, the way that it operates, the morals, you're likely to have a very similar approach. Coming in from an external perspective and independent to that, you might see and experience, I imagine, some, but I don't want to say unethical, but just questionable, potentially ways. Because I just feel like you kind of get stuck in your own groove, don't you? But the wider question, I think, is, and this is what the interesting thing about having conversations around ethics in business for me is, what does ethical really mean, right? Because you're relying on different people's perspective and ethical levels. And I think when you think about it from a family business perspective, you've got no one else's perspective other than that's in that space, isn't it?
Yeah. And you think about it, when that link to values, isn't it? It's such an intrinsic sense of identity, almost, that kind of really kind of heartfelt link to the values, which can be quite triggering. Actually, family values are very heartfelt, aren't they? They're held sacrosanct in some ways. It's like family first, and that's lovely. I think you're right, and I've got to say I have seen some family businesses where there was such a lovely, warm, inviting atmosphere, and things were done in a very, very nice, friendly way. And actually, they had some checks and balances there as well, so to make sure that things like salary reviews were fair, and it's just. I think I think it brings us back to leadership, doesn't it? That's the thing. It's like, what is the role of the person or the people at the head of that, those that are looked to for guidance. And I don't want to bash family businesses, but when you think, in my head, I'm going back to, I don't know, the Sopranos or something, this kind of patriarchy or matriarchy very much around, okay, so says this and there. But actually, it does come, actually that leadership, accountability and responsibility, isn't it, to almost set those expectations.
And I think when you and I can see your trigger if you're thinking of the Sopranos and ethics. I can see where the challenge is coming here. But in all due respect, I think you're right, and I think what the difficulty is, right? I think I imagine in my head, like my dad's family business back in the day, which real like an engineering workshop with a small team, and they were just proper old school engineers kind of thing. And I think probably back in those days, the leadership element didn't, it wasn't like we think of leadership now, I don't think. Do you know what I mean? And I think as well, when you think of family businesses, it depends, I feel like, on the size, the impact they want to create, the purpose of them. But definitely when they're starting to bring people in and they're starting to grow. I'm working with a business at the minute that is started as a family business, and it's grew incredibly quick. And we working together to help put structure, processes, values, missions, like all this in place to help put some framework in for the employees. Because when it does grow that quick and it's come from a family business, you just adapt, don't you? You get all hands on deck, you do what you need to do to get stuff done. But when you start to bring external people in, that's when the leadership, from my perspective, it'll either go on to thrive if the leader steps up and goes, we need to do something here, or if they just keep muddling on by, that's going to hit a ceiling of what they're going to be able to do with their people.
Yeah, I think you're right, isn't it? It's like I say, you're bringing others into that mix, aren't you? That blend. So it's less about everyone rolling their sleeves up and mucking in. There will be some more defined roles and responsibilities. And also, I don't want to go too much into policies, but actually just tacit agreements of acceptable behavior, acceptable processes, a little bit of segregation of duties, and that kind of hierarchical reporting lines, making sure there is that fairness starts to come in, because there's nothing more demotivating to somebody coming in from the external world into a new business, family or otherwise, to find that there's a definite culture of us and anyone new coming in being them. And I think that's where I've seen it in that sense. Or the things I've experienced and had to mop up weren't actually family businesses. They were businesses that had managed to employ family members and handled it very badly in terms of how they role modeled, how they structured the organization. So you had, I think, this doesn't give away anything, I'm not divulging any secrets here, a commercial director managing his wife, who was a sales director or a lead sales manager, who then had employed her mother as a salesperson. Like, those dynamics can be complicated, right?
If you want to write the biggest challenge and dynamic in a business, you've just nailed it, right?
Yeah. Husband, wife, mother-in-law, mother. I mean, excellent. It was extremely messy and very damaging in trust with the organization from other people within the sales focus, as sales structure, as you can imagine, but also any of those that interlinked with that, sadly, because mother wasn't performing, and that was because it wasn't tackled, it wasn't addressed, it wasn't. How do you manage your own mum? I love my mum, but I wouldn't work with my mum. I love her dearly, but no, I mean, she's in a completely different, she was always in a completely different industry to mine. It was never a risk, but I couldn't pull her up on something that would just be, I'd have to outsource that and have hence segregation of duty, right? You put somebody else in that as a buffer in that space. You can imagine how messy that could get.
But from a like, my background is in audit, risk management, corporate governance kind of background, and straight away when I hear that, rightly or wrongly, my mind goes straight back to what could be going through that line without anyone ever really noticing. Like, what controls have we got in place? What interventions have we got in that process of approval and authority, like all that stuff. And I think they're really challenging conversations to have with family members, because I think it's hard for people to have with other family members, but it's hard for a business to have with a family group, if that makes sense, because what you're kind of initiating is, I don't trust you potentially, but that's not what we're saying. It's to cover them as well as yourself, from my perspective of everyone needs protection, and we need some structure to help protect everybody from that, and need difficult conversations.
Exactly, and they are obviously very difficult conversations. And like you say, it's not saying you don't trust, it's saying actually there are risks here. There are risks there that need to be mitigated, and actually to be mitigated not just for the people involved, but also for the perception and perspective of the external world looking in. saying, actually, that's
Absolutely.
probably not the healthiest setup to have in your
Yeah.
organization, when you could probably make some adjustments to mitigate that. Now, brings me on to the, what is the role of a leader in that? Ultimately, what is the role of the board to look at that structure and go, that's not acceptable? Ethically, here we go back to what are ethics, that level of risk, that level of potential for mistrust, the level of potential for, if one gets kind of pulled up on something, is that then going to bring in that kind of family value of, well, you do that to one, you do that to all of us kind of attitudes.
Yeah.
And you suddenly open up this cloud of stuff, and it's all potential. It's all not necessarily happened.
Yeah.
In this, in my example, it absolutely did, but it doesn't have to have happened. And yet the risk and the perception and the perspectives of others are still need to be taken into account at that point. So how would you actually describe the role of, say, a leader in that space? So the commercial director, the husband in that scenario, the board that he would sit on as part of that organization. What is their role to set those standards?
That is a really interesting part of that dynamic, right? Because for me, that role of that board is to make sure that that organization is behaving ethically and that they're protecting the welfare of the stakeholders and shareholders of that organization, right? And I think it's making sure that there are controls, there is processes, and we're setting out expectations. And I think that even having a discussion around the table to say, is this ethically the right way we want to run our business? And going back to the point I made earlier, what's ethical is different to different people. So I'm sure if you ask the husband who wants his mum and wife to work for them, he's totally fine with that, completely ethical. I'm not saying it's not unethical. Different people have different views. But from that board, the independent, right? They have the independent perspective. Their best interest is the organization and the business, not necessarily that dynamic of employee and family members. And I always say, you can't manage expectations if you don't set them. So how are we setting expectations, and how are the board setting their level of expectations to know what's going on? But I think it's the communication between the business and the board that's really important, because they only know and exposed to what they exposed to, right? They're not in the day-to-day. So I think the role is to protect the business and to define what's ethical, what's accepted, and what that expectation is.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with that more. And what was really interesting in this particular example is there was no HR representation at board level. Obviously, I've done a whole series on leadership. Sorry, We're Human HR stuff, effectively. And it's really interesting to see the organizations that don't have that HR voice at board level, which would maybe have picked up on some of this stuff and said, that's a risk.
And also the diversity of the board. I think even if you don't have a HR specific representative, what diversity have you got? Like, if you've got the same person basically replicated around the table, you're never going to get that conversation. But whereas if you have different people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and different views of the world, like, for me, I think it's their place to be challenging, Yeah.
That's a really interesting thing, actually, isn't it? Because you think about diversity at board level, you think, okay, so how, trying to reduce the number of middle-aged white guys and bring in some diversity in terms of other genders, other races, other cultural beliefs, religious beliefs. What we don't look at is actually that blend of values at board level. What's the diversity of values at board level to have that rich conversation around what's right, what's wrong, what's safe, what's risky, what the customer world, the external world, the new potential onboarding recruitment world wants to see of this organization to make you an attractive organization, a safe organization, a well-managed organization. If you don't have those different voices, because you've CEO, as you've been scaling, you've managed to basically recruit in your own image, then that's dangerous, right? That's real. So again, there's an element there, isn't there, as a leader? If you're the leader that's right at the top of that tree, having that responsibility around your own standards to say, I need to be tested, I need to be. How many do you think actually sit there and go, I need to bring in people that will do it with me.
Do you know, like I'm Rachel, like I'm smiling because I am obviously I coach on this. I do leadership and management. Like this is just day to day for me, right?
Yeah.
But I am actually going through and living this right now with the ethical coaching company.
All right.
I'll come back and answer your question from a coaching perspective, but just to share a little bit of the pain behind the scenes, a little bit.
No, I want to hear it.
I've created an advisory board for the ethical coaching company because I want to be challenged. I want different opinions. I want somebody to ask me, so what? What's the point? What's the like? What you doing that for? What's the benefit? And the people that I chose are from completely different backgrounds, experience, values, beliefs, and I know them all very well. I trust them. And I would not have invited them in if I hadn't. But I knew I wasn't going to get an easy ride. And that was the point, right? Like that was the point, because I don't want people to sit around that table and go, what an amazing idea, Kirsty. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, brilliant. What I want them to say is, have you thought about that? What's the consequence of that? Like, I don't know. I don't understand where you're coming from with that. Like, how are you going to protect the clients about that? You know, I really want to be challenged. So when you said that, I was like, oh, I feel that pain. Like, but going back to a coaching perspective of the question you mentioned about how many leaders actually sit and think. Honestly, I don't think that many, because when you grow in a business, you're very much, you know, all hands on deck. It's you do what you can to get it off the ground, right? And at the point that you're at the level that you need a board, first of all, I don't know if you really know that you're ready for that. Like, you know, you kind of, I feel like you need some intervention from a coach, a mentor, an independent perspective, just to have those conversations. And if you're not naturally very, very self-aware and intentional about reflection and going, because a lot of people, yeah, they're really ambitious and they know what they want to achieve with their business, but I think sometimes the business will only get to a certain point with that vision of that leader, and I think you need to open the perspective of yourself as a leader. But unless you see, and I think a lot comes back to leaving the ego at the door a little bit, of thinking you've got to know everything and do everything yourself, and just having conversations with other people, either in your industry or a mentor that's, you know, been there and done it, or a coach to help you see that, just to actually see, right, okay, there's other people that I can help here and that can help me get there. But sometimes that's really difficult, as in giving up giving up and actually asking for help. Whereas from my perspective, I just ask all the time. I'm like, can someone help me?
Even when you do though, there's a risk, isn't there? There's a moment where you go, right, okay, I recognize I need help. I'm going to need somebody to be, you know, marketing lead. I'm going to need a finance lead. I'm going to need an ops lead, somebody to do the operational stuff while I do the thinking. And that's great. Okay, so you start kind of looking for those people, you start interviewing, and you know, our brains are wired to avoid threat, aren't they? Avoid things that, you know, you're like me, you're not like me. It goes all the way back to the kind of Eric Burns' work, wasn't it? The kind of you're like me, you're not like me. I feel threatened, I don't feel threatened. And ultimately, when you're interviewing people, even if they're in different areas, so finance person, marketing person, you're still wired up to look for someone you feel comfortable with.
Yeah,
and that's the real test. It's actually, can you look at somebody objectively and say, I don't feel comfortable with you in terms of, I trust you to do your job. You're clearly very well qualified. We haven't gelled and agreed on absolutely everything I've been talking about in the interview, so therefore I don't want you. Or actually, you're exactly the person I need because we haven't agreed on absolutely everything I've been talking about in the interview. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, to manage that self perspective, and hard. I mean, super hard for
very hard. Definitely. Really. And I think from my perspective, for me, fundamentally, people have to be aligned in their core values and how they feel and think about things. Because I think fundamentally you can have a difference of opinion and a different way of doing things, as long as at the core you have similar values about, you know, what's important to the business. Like for us at the Ethical Coaching Company, it's all around integrity, you know, quality, boldness, but kindness. You know, I want kindness. I want everyone to lead with empathy within the business and have compassion for each other. But yeah, we still strive for excellence, right? But if someone was to come in and not align with that, but I love them and I got on with them on a surface level, I wouldn't want them in the business, because that's going to create a challenge at some point, because you just fundamentally disagree on what's right and wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think you alluded earlier to, what it looks like in terms of role modeling, but also holding others to account, because that's the kind of a whole other side of it, isn't it? It's like, okay, if we have a very clear agreement in terms of, as CEO, I've been scaling, I've created this set of values, code of ethics, whatever it looks like, that's it. And you have somebody else come in and say, yeah, I want you to disagree with me, I want you to kind of challenge me, but at the same time, what I don't want you to do is go against this agreed code of ethics, code of values, because ultimately that's been pre-agreed, or it's been thought about, it's been heavily considered, and that's what we want the organization to be known for. So coming in and saying, oh, we could be a little bit loose with that one, or a little bit, and kind of letting that scope creep kind of come in. It's tough, isn't it, to kind of really find that balance, but you can have those discussions without them being, against your kind of agreed values, your agreed sense of purpose.
And I think those agreed values and sense of purpose are what attracts the right people.
Yeah.
Like the non-negotiables, like, come and talk to me and challenge me on the process, or the way we do this, or how we get that done, how we complete the project the best. Brilliant. That's what I want. I don't want someone to come and tell me, actually, the core fundamentals of your business I don't agree with, because that's why I set the business up, and that the same as, I think having that solid, this is who we are as a business, is really fundamental from the leadership. And even when we talk leadership, right, some people might not identify as a leader if they've created the business and scaled it, or they've come from a family business. But fundamentally, they have to, at some point, step into the role of leader, as in taking that business in the direction they want. Because if they don't lead it, nobody else is going to, because no one else is going to have that drive and passion for that business other than them. So whilst that might sound scary, somebody has to do it. And if they're not intentionally doing it, it's either just going to float along, or it's going to be directionless and not grow any further.
There's a big difference, isn't there, between rolling your sleeves up and doing the do, down in the weeds, and plotting the course, being up there, mapping, looking at the horizon and saying, where do we need to go next? Okay, this is happening. This is great. That's what your ops director, your ops lead is for, to help you do that when you've got them in place, right? That's freeing you up to go to, and the amount of you and I work in the same sort of bracket in terms of our other job, if you like, and is this learning area. So I'm CMI, you're ILM. No competition. But ultimately, the amount of times I sit with a senior manager moving into leadership who suddenly gets what they wish for, they suddenly get that thinking space, and my team are empowered, they're doing really well. When they go and try and help them, they're like, no, back off, we've got this, which is a lovely thing to hear from your team. Go and do what you need to do. When we need your support, we know you're there for us. And it's a beautiful situation to be in. And one of the first things he said to me was that it's really uncomfortable. It feels itchy and scratchy, and you're going to have to sit with that discomfort for a while. Let's have a think about what that feels like and why it's come about, and the good bits that have come from it, because it's shifting that mindset from, when you're doing the do, you get immediate kind of dopamine hits for getting a job done, right? So like done, ticked off, lovely. Now your results are going to come 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the line. So you're not going to get that immediate kind of rush of, I got that job done, the clients just said thank you straight away. It's all very quick and instantaneous, that instant reward. Now you're thinking about your reward's going to come a lot later. So how do we find rewarding yourself? The strategic planning, ticking that off your list, ticking a presentation to a new client or a new form of business, finding some information that might help inform your plotting of your course. That's the sort of stuff you now need to find rewarding. Because you can't roll your sleeves up and go back into doing the do, unless it's times of crisis, which, let's face it, then sometimes we all have to stop and go, all right, we'll all muck in for a bit. But that should be the exception and not the norm. But it's such a shift in mindset, isn't it? It's such a difficult thing.
Huge shift in mindset, because it's a huge change of not just mindset, but physically what they do day to day is very different, right? And when they're mucking in and rolling their sleeves up, they're one of the team, they're close to the workers, the people in the workforce. They also feel that element of, I'm supporting them because I can see the support, they can see me support. And I think there's almost that transition to reframe how they support the business, right? Because they need to understand all those strategic conversations that being the face of the business, driving the business forward, is them supporting the business and supporting the people within the business just as much as rolling their sleeves up. And I think there's that challenge of the team can't see me working really hard, actually visually working really hard.
So they're going to think I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, I'm sitting with my feet up in this office, you know, I'm having a jolly when I go out and meet someone, you know, a meeting. Like, it's how they reframe it for themselves. And I think it's that transition is a really hard transition. And I think that's people can get stuck there for a real long time in that messy middle bit that I kind of see it as. And what happens is, if you don't get some support at that stage, like whatever that support may look like, obviously I know I'm really biased, but just a coaching perspective, or just another sounding board, somebody to help you see over the hill, because you're going in to a completely different role, but it's a role that's needed, and it's a role that is so important to the growth of the business.
Exactly. It's securing the future, isn't it? That's the thing. That role moves from doing the do, because they're capable. You've got your team to a great space. Well done. Kudos. Pat yourself on the back. Your role now is securing the future of the business, taking it in the direction for your clients, for your team. Also, a thing about actually ethically, going back to ethics again, is if you've empowered your team to that degree and then you start going in and dibbling again, it can go from feeling supportive, you think you're supporting, to them it could feel smothering.
Yeah, disempowering.
It's thinking about what is that, what's the dynamic now, because that will shift, and being comfortable with that change, and ethically saying, I've trusted these people, I've empowered them, or say I have, now I have to step back and let them do their jobs.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
That's scary as hell, isn't it? I mean, that's like, oh yeah, I don't know, do I trust them? And yet they've proven time and time again, usually, that they're trustworthy. Even if they make mistakes, they go, right, I've got a solution. If you've built that culture, they'll do the right thing by you and your business. If you haven't built that culture, all right, things could be very different. But ethically, don't get back in there and start smothering, micromanaging, as we know how damaging that can be. It's really, it just makes
and I think just that point on culture, I just think the landscape of the working world is changing, and it's changing dramatically, like very quickly. I think COVID catapulted it. I think, you know, with the whole flexible work and people having to trust their employees, you know. But I think when I think of the culture conversation in the workplace, if you think 3 or 4 years ago, it wasn't really hard. You either liked the workplace or you didn't, and you didn't really know why. And, you know, but now everybody's really it's a real hot potato topic of what's the culture, how can we improve it, what does that mean, how can we, you know, support our employees. And I think a lot of businesses are talking about ethics a lot more, and talking about, you know, like if you think of like the what they called B Corps and all that conversation, like they just like, the more people, and I know more people now really focused on either getting certified or getting pendant, or, you know, just openly having conversations about how can we do good and build a business at the same time. And that just makes my heart sing with joy that people are having the conversations. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of people out there that aren't, and there is still a way to go, but the conversations being had are incredible, and I'm really happy, like this conversation, to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, actually, it's one of the last releases from the HR series was around Gen Z, or Gen Z, as my lovely guest was calling us. He was from over the pond, and we were talking about actually the Gen Z employees. So they're out of uni now, they're in the workplace, they're kind of just coming out of maybe their second year of their graduate placements, that kind of thing. They're in the workforce, yet they're not staying with organizations that they don't gel with on a cultural and ethical basis.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. I love that they're voting with their feet on that front, because it's forcing businesses to take notes, sit up and go, oh, okay. But at the same time, business and leaders have to consider this multi-generational workforce, because they still will have a few boomers hanging around. They'll still be there going, no, I don't want anything to change. I want to do this and this and this. But my gen, I think I'm an X, I'm not sure. So I'm 46, I think I'm somewhere in Gen X. Going, well, actually, if I was in employment, I would be looking at culture, possibly not more than ethics, but definitely culture and ethics together. Less
Yeah.
about B Corp maybe, although my nature loving hat would be very much in the B Corp space. And then you've got, your millennials that again, they're in their 30s now, so they're entrenched in an organization. They might be looking at not a job for life, but possibly an organization for life that they can grow and switch and change around in. And well, we don't know what Gen Alpha is going to do we? That's the thing. They're coming through. Will they be in the same bracket as Gen X, thinking climate's really freaking serious now, we need to do something? Well, and so the B Corp side of things will be much more, what's your climate stance beyond, all the other stuff B Corp stands for? What's your climate stance? What's going on there? How sustainable will you be? It just, some assurity in a world that feels hugely topsy-turvy. Be coming out of, and they'll have done their exams through COVID. So,
and I think the generation conversation needs to be had with leaders, because I think they're at risk of being left behind if they're not evolving with the changes of what's going on. Like you say, Gen Z are completely ripping the paper up and doing it their own way, which I love. Like, I love it. I think I'm a millennial, but just hanging on, I think. But
I always wonder where I think I'm right on the bracket between X and millennial. I think if I was born 2 years later, I'd just about be a millennial, but I think
but I think that, like, I was having a conversation with it was actually a fire and rescue organization, so the fire brigade. And they have obviously a very traditional employer, and there's a need for it, right? Like, there is and there's always going to be a need for it. But it was a real challenging conversation around how are you moving and recruiting new people, because people don't want a job for life, right? Like, people don't want to go into an industry or a role, specifically an organization, and stay there till the retirement. But that's what they used to having in institute, really. That was the standard recruitment process. And so there's organizations and institutes that really need to think, how can we do things differently? And I was chatting to someone this week, and she was saying, like, by I think 2030, 70% of the jobs have not yet that we will be doing have not yet been established or created. Like, the way of the working world is going to change so much that, and I'm like, how do we future-proof ourselves of that as a leader? And that's a really, for me, interesting conversation.
Yeah. So actually, with that in mind, then, if you think about actually as a leader nowadays, so say you're the head of a growing business, it's a new business, a startup. If you're scaling and you're in that space where suddenly you're kind of growing and getting that little bit bigger, looking at actually, what do my future recruits maybe look like? What are they going to want, need? What will they be driven by? What's the world going to need from my industry, my organization? If we were to kind of start, the foundations of a toolkit, a little toolbox, a nice little box to drag along behind us to pick from as and when we need it, what would be one of the first things you would put in that toolbox to support a leader in coping with a very, very unclear future, a very, very unclear world in terms of what things are going to look like?
I don't think necessarily this is a tool, but I think it's definitely something that, and it comes back to the diversity of the advice that we take in as a leader. And I would make sure that I have a whole array of people around me from different generations. And I think sometimes, and this is a little bit the traditional approach of, if you're the leader, you know everything, you don't go to people that are younger. But for me, having conversations with that younger generation, getting them involved in the business in some way, or just having some access to them to keep, to understand. Because I think when you get to a leadership level in a traditional organization, the people that have made it to the top tend to be of a certain age, and they're going to probably be very similar to you. But if you look at the businesses out there being run by younger generations, like look at Gymshark, and just how forward thinking they are and how incredibly successful they are. There is so much to learn from the younger generation. So for the first point, I would say make sure you've got a diverse range of people around you that you're looking to for guidance or inspiration for the business. And I definitely think, obviously really biased here, some form of coaching or mentor to have at hand, you know. It's again that independent perspective, that kind of counsel to help you think differently. And the whole thing that I'm trying to get with my toolkit that I'm creating, Rachel, is to help you see things differently, to help challenge your perspective, to help see a wider vision, what's available and out there. Because I think you don't know everything, right? And I think there is so much change going on, and it's happening really, really rapidly. I think if you're not willing to be fluid and ride that wave and adapt as you go, you're going to be left behind. But to adapt, you need to know what's out there and what people want. So I think having that conversation with your diverse support group, having someone to help you think differently about things, maybe show you your own unconscious bias where you've been, you know. And I think
that's safe space, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a safe space to kind of vent, to rant, to pour all of this stuff out, to let your biases out, to then have somebody hold that mirror up and say, okay, it's good that you've got that out. Okay, this piece of thinking probably isn't going to help you moving forwards. So how can we challenge that? How can we find information that helps build a more complete picture around the assumption that you've made of Gen Xers or Gen Alphas, kids today, all of that stuff? Because let's face it, all of these things will come out, and that's what's lovely. And yes, I am going to bang the drum for coaching because I think, well, it's my podcast and I can. It's my toy box and I can play with it. Ultimately, you know, why wouldn't you want that safe space to have that conversation in confidence, knowing you're not being judged for having it? Those feelings are genuine, they are true to you. It may be that the things that are driving those feelings are misinformed, and that's the thing to taking apart and saying, actually, how do I get greater evidence? Am I right on this? Really, I'd love to be right, but actually it's not helpful that I think I'm right when I actually haven't with it that deeply. And it's a really interesting space for leaders to be in, to find themselves in that space. And obviously I will bang the drum for coaching for everyone, because I don't think it should be an elitist thing. It's one of those things that does tend to get given to the C-suite. I'd love to see it really, really culturally everywhere in every organization. That's past, and I'm sure that'll be something I find someone to talk about at some point. But you're right. It's you know, gear up so that you have that space, whether it's a coach. And I suppose, I know we're flying the flag for coaching here because, you know, we're obviously both very, very biased. But in the interest of being ethically fair to other practices and other professionals, what other support services do you think actually could play a role to assist leaders in kind of exploring that, staying the course, getting the information they need to be better informed?
Yeah. And there's loads, isn't there? Like, I think straight away, like, obviously having things like an advisory board, as well as your board of directors, or having someone also what's local. Like, you have some, like, we've got a Northeast Ethical Business Club where businesses of all sizes that are really interested in running ethical businesses come along and connect. Also, if you think of industry specific, what's going on in your industry, how can you get involved in, you know, conversations that are being had about where the industry's going? Do you know what I mean? Like, get yourself involved in things, have conversations with different people, and be really open about that. And I think also something that's really great is getting involved with universities and education institutes as well, because that's where you're going to start to hear about the rumblings of what's changing at that level, you know, like, and there's always, like, we've got a business, I think it's called like a business club of part of our local university, and they run business events where there is a combination of businesses, you know, the business students, that kind of thing. So get yourself involved with lots of different things. You don't necessarily have to go and pay a coach to get that different perspective, but it depends what you want and what you're looking for. But I would just,
you can always bring that stuff back to your coach to explore, right?
But absolutely. But I don't want people to feel like they have to have a coach to succeed, because they don't. Absolutely not. But I think just start to look out there outside of the business, because if you look inward, it's great to look at the resource inside and give people opportunity to speak and bring different ideas and things to the table. But if you're pulling from the same pool all the time, you're going to get similar mindset and similar, ideas. Whereas if you mix that with looking externally, you're kind of keeping your ideas open, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, isn't it, as well? I think the thoughts were popping in my head as you were talking then. And actually there's two big things that have come out for me. One was actually really interesting. I don't know that many leaders that have an advisory board outside of their board of directors at all. I couldn't name any, I don't think, off the top of my head, apart from you. So what was your first step in terms of setting up your advisory board? How did you go about that? What was the actually, this is what I needed to do. This is what I want from them. How do you engage people to go, yeah, all right, I'll come and be on your advisory board?
Really great question. And I'll be really open with how this worked for me, right? I know this business is bigger than me. I don't want to be the bottleneck. I want to get people in that will challenge me. I don't want it just to be my thoughts. And I knew I needed something. And I'm like, I know that I'm not at a point that I can bring an exec board in. I do want it to get to that level, but I was like, I'm not there yet. Mm-hmm. So I was like, right, what's the other option? An advisory board. And I went and did a little bit of research, and I'd been on advisory boards and how to create it and stuff. And I literally went, who would I really love on my advisory board? And I just thought of people that I knew it turned out that every single person on there has been really significant in my journey of life, I suppose, at different points for different reasons. But they're all incredible leaders in their own right. They're very, very successful. They've achieved incredible things. I admire them all as people. I kind of went, oh, that's the wish list of people that I know that I would love to ask. And then I kind of sat on it for about a month and went, oh, I daren't ask. Oh, dare I ask?
How did you ask? I think I would be in that headspace. Like, oh, are they going to want to help me? Will they give their time to me? Am I worth it? All of those worries. All of those.
Rachel, I have gone through that and go through that on a daily basis. So I started with the easy one when I was having a conversation with one of them about the whole ethical coaching company, saying about the advisory board. And he was like, if you ever need any support, just let me know. Well, funny you should say that. And like that was brilliant. He came through. Every single person has been really actually like amazed that I've asked them and really honored and really like committed to it. And because obviously it's not a paid role right now. It's like I would love it to be a paid role. And I was really open. I was just like, because obviously you go through that mind of like, I am asking this incredibly busy person to give me their time for free for nothing. But for my vision, for my baby, right? Yeah. And that's really challenging. So anyway, I eventually asked 4 people, the 4 people I wanted, the 4 people I wrote down, all said yes, all came on board, super, super happy. And I kind of these people sit on boards of other businesses as well. So they way more experience, obviously, in board level stuff than me. I've kind of gone along and attended from a corporate perspective, but they literally sit on boards. And then I got connected with somebody who runs a not-for-profit organisation in the Northeast. I want to call it the Experience Lab, but I'm really sorry if I've got that wrong. And they support businesses with building advisory boards and non-exec boards as a support, and it's part of it's for free. It's a free resource that you have to apply to use it and stuff. But it was just really bizarre that I got introduced to the guy who founded it, and I was like, oh, I've just created an advisory board I could really do with some help, basically, of like, how do I structure it? How do I set up what we have to do? And he gave me some incredible advice, which was brilliant, because I want to respect the people in there. I don't want them to feel that like what they're showing up for, what I'm doing. So I kind of went back, got some support on it, got some guidance. We've had our first session, and it just feels really great to have that independent perspective that I know is, they're just there to give advice. They're not there to make decisions. They're not there to take actions. It's literally like picking the brains of 4 amazing business people.
Yeah.
And asking them questions.
I like that. I do like that too. I think the other thing that's going through my head, I'm trying to hold on to that thought, because I get carried away, I get listening and I forget what I was going to say. But actually there is, it's kind of almost like an ambition almost. I think when I first heard of actually the company, the ethical coaching company, in my head, I'm like, isn't it such a shame in this industry that we have to put the word ethical in to promote a business. And it's right to do that because there is so much out there in the world of coaching. As we know, it's unregulated, it's not mandatory to be qualified, let alone accredited. There's a lot of people setting themselves up and calling themselves coaches. They might be mentors, it might be something else, but they're calling themselves coaches. And then beyond that, there's all the coaches who sell coaching to coaches to, I'm going to turn your business into a 7-figure business in X number. Look at my business, that's 7 figures. So yeah, but you're spending 7 figures on your marketing and your product. Yeah. So, you just all of this stuff that drives us all. It drives, I think, everyone that is a genuine bona fide, dyed in the mill, proper, serious coach that has a love for this industry and absolute belief in what it can do, drives them potty. Because it undermines the value coaching has. It feeds into the minds of the detractors, those that have maybe had a bad experience in the past. They'll have a bias against coaching. It'll just feed that and kind of make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And that bias, confirmation bias, is just more confirmed by all of these charlatans that I'm going to get. Parking my anger on charlatan coaches. I mean, ultimately, if you got to a point, say, I don't know, 20 years down the line, ethical coaching companies doing amazingly well, and I don't know, by some miracle, coaching has become a regulated industry, like counselling is, like psychotherapy might be. You need to be at least qualified if you're not accredited. So you need to have that level of qualification and demonstrate that you have, say, regular supervision or something to maintain your standard of practice. I mean, to me, that's like, yes, absolutely seems like a no-brainer, but clearly, big, lots of people against that. If that happened, would you change the name of the business?
No.
No,
because we're deeply ingrained in operating with integrity, getting results for people, it being tangible. Like, that is just like, it drives me mad when I don't, like, all the stuff you said there, like, don't get me started. I can be on that soapbox with you all day. Like, and that's why the business was born, right? Like, it wasn't born out of the word because I loved ethics. It was like, let's sort this, this industry out.
That one last thing that dropped into your DMs that made you go, oh, FF. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this business. I'm going to call it the Ethical Coaching Company. Go, all right, you've done it now.
It's just like, do you know how it was started? Do you know how I came across it?
No.
I don't know if I told you this when we chatted earlier, but one of the ladies on my board of advisors now, we were having a coffee locally, and we were chatting, and she was saying, she's amazing in business. She's she supports a lot of businesses, and that's her business. Their business supports other businesses. So she was just chatting and saying, is there any support that you'd like in your business? Like, what you're planning, where you're going with it? And I was kind of going, don't know what I want to do, because with my own coaching practice, I was like, when I left corporate, I'd set out to, replace my corporate salary, and that was even just like thinking that's really far off, but I kind of achieved it, and I'm getting a little bit like, what's next kind of thing, but I didn't know. And I was kind of banging my gums about the ethics and the morals and the industry, and I was a little bit disengaged with the reputation of it and just driven mad. And she was like, well, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, what am I going to do about it? And literally, I went to see her again at her offices about a month later, and I'd literally registered the business, bought the domain, got the plan, like wrote the business plan, and literally like just mapped it out. It just, that trigger of like, what do I want this industry to be? And how can I have an impact in it, right? Like, I'm not delusional. I don't think for 1 minute that I'm going to change the world, but I want to have a positive impact in my space, like as much and as big as I can. And obviously there's a collective of coaches that all think the same as us, that all have that outlook, that all have that view. And I just thought, if we were all banging that drum as a collective, at least the ripple effect from us as a group will be having a positive impact. And then hopefully the more people that have those positive experiences will then support their teams and their leaders. And, hopefully that ripple will keep going positively.
Upswell, isn't it? It's starting, getting that, dropping the rock into the pond to make the wave, and then that wave getting bigger till it's a kind of tsunami of doing things the right way in terms of coaching. And ultimately also educating businesses so they start to expect it of coaches in industry, so they're not just going out and going, oh well, you say you can do this, so that will do. They go, no, can I ask you, what your credentials are. Can I ask you for some
Yeah,
testimonials? I want to check that I'm bringing in the right kind of coach. I mean,
absolutely.
it's at the moment that the coaching procurement process is really
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, some organizations are very, very good at it. They'll insist on, some will go almost too far the other way. You have to be to a certain
Mm.
there's an organization that I pitched for a while ago who didn't accept me because I wasn't ICF accredited, because I am EMCC accredited. And I'm like, I'm not going to have two accreditations just to please you. So I let that one go. But they were very, you must be ICF, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay,
But I
fine.
feel like that is
Yeah,
very, I feel like, without being judgmental to those people, like I'm not saying that, I just think that to me is an education of the industry.
yeah,
It's forcing you into one space when actually, and this is coming from the experience of going through onboarding a host of coaches with all different kinds of qualifications, accreditations, experience. And when I first set out, I was like, right, everybody has to have this, everybody has to have that. But as I got more into it, it's like, right, okay, there is such a vast way to quantify qualified. We take a multi-layered approach of like, it is qualification. Any accreditations you're saying you have, we need evidence of that. It's how many hours have you coached. It is what's your testimonials, what's your recommendations. And these are people we want a reference from within your industry, and these people are all contacted independently by our team, and we kind of build a picture of somebody. It's like, it's not just you've got this, you're in, you've got that, you're out. It is, we want to bring people with the values that we strongly, strongly believe in. And if you wouldn't last long in the ethical coaching company if you weren't fully on board with what we were trying to achieve. Like, exactly. Literally, yeah. I've just had a session with our coaches this morning, and we all just like are that way, thinking, inclined, and it's so strong.
Yeah.
If you weren't as passionate as we are, it would appear very quickly.
I love it. I do love it. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm really, really conscious on time, and I think I could, obviously, you and I could bang the drum for coaching all day and all night if we had to. I think over a glass of wine, maybe, yeah. Maybe one day. Ultimately, I think a quick kind of close off in terms of, we've strayed a little bit away from leadership, I guess, but actually at the same time, we talked very much about leaders being open to new things and not being kind of blinkered. And there's an element of that, isn't there? With my example around, organizations that are very, must be this, must be that. It's taking those blinkers off and saying, okay, what's out there, what's there. If you could give one bit of advice to somebody who's moving, say, either from management to leadership in the way of the scaling their business, or they've been promoted into leadership, or anything in that space, in that bracket, so they have this bigger leadership hat to wear, shoes to fill. What would be the one bit of advice you would like to give them? And you're not allowed to say get a coach, because that's too easy.
What I would say is it is a transition, and give yourself permission to develop into a new skill, into a new role, in whatever that is for you, because it is a different skill set that you need. So give yourself permission to not just wake up one day and be the best leader. Be a conscious leader. What kind of a leader do you want to be? And then go and learn and be that.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that. Thank you so, so much for your time. Now, all of my guests do get an opportunity to do the shameless plug at the end. So do let us know how we can get in touch with you, with the ethical coaching company, find out more. We'll put your links in the show notes anyway, but what would you like to get out there now to remind people of who you are and where we can find you?
Yeah, I hang out on LinkedIn, as does the Ethical Coaching Company. Obviously, we've got a website, theethicalcoachingcompany.com, but just come and follow us, come and get on board, come and support the Ethical Train, and just learn about what we do, because there is a lot of resources out there. We've got an amazing bank of coaches. So yeah, come and check us out.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. So a big thank you to Kirsty for today's session. If you like this note, when you realize you really like this and you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button wherever it is you happen to listen. If you're watching on YouTube, then please do subscribe as well, because I'm hoping to get enough listeners and watchers to get a one of those URLs that actually is your organization or podcast name, rather than just a set of numbers, which really, really frustrates me. So yeah, if you can help me with that, that would be great. Hit subscribe, and I will hopefully have you listening to the next episode too.